I am an old man, and I have seen fortunes built and more often demolished. The difference between the two outcomes is rarely due to raw intelligence or mystical market timing. It is almost always a consequence of understanding what not to do. The world wants you to believe that wealth is achieved through aggressive action, through seeking the next big opportunity, chasing speculative assets, or leveraging yourself to the hilt. That, in my experience, is utter nonsense. If you want to get rich, the first and most effective step is subtraction. You must surgically remove the guaranteed wealth destroyers from your life. The world is full of people who are running up a down escalator. They work hard, they earn decent money, yet they never seem to accumulate anything of significance. Why? Because they are consistently culturally programmed to purchase items, assets, and habits that relentlessly transfer their future net worth to someone else. Today, I'm going to discuss the 5 greatest destroyers of nascent wealth. One of them is likely the most expensive single purchase you have ever made, and it is championed relentlessly by the government, the banks, and the real estate lobby as the cornerstone of the American dream. I am here to tell you that the so-called American dream is often a guaranteed financial nightmare, a debt anchor disguised as an asset. Let's start with the most insidious destroyer, one that traps the middle class in a permanent cycle of capital, destruction, and opportunity cost. Wealth destroyer. Number 1, the primary residence. Yes, I said it. Buying the house you live in. I know this triggers the common man who immediately starts screaming about equity, inflation hedge, and stable living. Let me stop you right there. I don't care what your emotional attachment is to the patch of grass outside your door. I care about mathematics, opportunity cost, and the crushing reality of transaction fees. We must apply the principle of inversion here. Instead of asking how much money you can make owning a house, ask how many ways owning a house can destroy your financial future. First, consider the sheer deadweight loss of transaction cost. When you buy, you immediately hemorrhage 3% or more in various fees, inspections, title insurance, bank origination fees, and transfer taxes. When you sell, the average real estate commission is 5% to 6%. That means, just to break even, your house needs to appreciate by roughly 10%. After you factor in inflation, this is before considering a single mortgage payment or maintenance cost. If you are buying and selling every 5 to 7 years, which is the national average, you are systematically destroying 10% of your capital base every cycle, feeding an entire ecosystem of lawyers, bankers, and brokers who are far more sophisticated than you are. But the real killer is the opportunity cost inherent in the down payment. Imagine you put down $100,000 on a $500,000 house. That $100,000 is now liquid, trapped, and subject to localized risk. If that $100,000 had instead been put into a diversified low-cost index fund, something like the S&P 500, and compounded patiently over 20 years, even with conservative assumptions, that money would have ballooned into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Instead, the money is funding a highly complex leveraged transaction where the interest payments in the early years disproportionately benefit the bank. People look at the principal they pay down and feel good. They ignore the fact that the actual cost of ownership is far higher than the principal and interest. You have property taxes, which are perpetual and ever increasing. You have insurance, which is mandatory, and you have maintenance. Maintenance is an absolute black hole. The rule of thumb, which often proves optimistic, is that you should budget 1% to 2% of the home's value annually for upkeep. on a $500,000 house. That is $5,000 to $10,000 every single year, money that is gone forever simply to keep the structure from collapsing. You are paying for a forced hobby of mowing lawns, fixing leaking roofs, and replacing broken air conditioners. This expenditure yields zero financial return. It merely preserves the existing asset value. You must view your primary residence as a massive, mandatory consumption item, similar to a car, only 10 times more expensive and 10 times more illiquid. It is not a productive asset. It does not generate cash flow. It consumes cash flow. Now, if this radical shift in perspective on wealth accumulation has already challenged one of your core beliefs, that your home is a guaranteed asset, then you ought to take a moment right now and click that button to subscribe. If you're going to waste my time listening to unpopular truths, you might as well ensure you catch the next batch. I know the counter-argument, but Munger, I get the leverage. I put down 20% and control 100% of the asset. Yes, you control 100% of the asset and 100% of the risk. If the local economy tanks, your diversification is zero. If you had taken that same 20% down payment and applied modest, intelligent leverage, say, borrowing against a diversified portfolio or using sophisticated margin-backed low-interest debt to buy quality businesses, your risk would be spread out globally, and your assets would be productive, generating profits, not demanding repairs. When you rent, your maximum loss is your security deposit. When you own, your losses are theoretically unlimited. Structural damage, unforeseen assessments, or a prolonged dip in the housing market that prevents you from relocating for a job opportunity without taking a huge loss. Renting provides liquidity and optionality, two things that are absolutely invaluable to a young person trying to maximize future income potential. The house, for most people, is simply the most culturally acceptable mechanism for locking themselves into debt servitude, masking their consumption as investment. Avoid it if you can rent cheaply and invest the difference wisely. Live modestly for decades, let compounding do the heavy lifting, and then, perhaps, if you absolutely must, buy a house outright when the purchase is insignificant compared to your total net worth. Until then, you are sacrificing your best compounding years to fund a highly inefficient storage unit. For your family, that is the first destroyer. It's hard to swallow, but the math does not lie. Wealth destroyer number 2, leverage used for consumption. This is the twin brother of the primary residence problem, only far more rapid and vicious. I'm talking about high-interest debt, credit card balances, installment plans for cars or furniture, and unnecessary margin debt used to chase market whims. If destroyer number 1 is a slow structural corrosion, destroyer number 2 is an aggressive chemical burn. You want to understand the nature of ruin? It is defined by negative compounding. We all understand that wealth grows exponentially when high returns are reinvested patiently, but the mirror image of compounding returns is compounding interest charged against you, and nothing in the consumer world generates more rapid, destructive negative compounding than credit card debt. Imagine you have a $10,000 credit card balance at the average current rate of 22%. That is a guaranteed annual loss of $20 to $200 every month you fail to pay it off. The interest is calculated on the previous month's interest. It is a mathematical trap designed by the banking sector to perfectly exploit human psychological biases, the bias toward immediate gratification and the inability to comprehend geometric growth or decay. I tell young people, if you carry credit card debt, you are mathematically insane. You are agreeing to pay a 22% rate of return for the privilege of owning a sweater or a fancy dinner. There is no legitimate investment, none, that reliably returns 22% after taxes year after year with low risk. Therefore, every dollar you have invested in the stock market or bonds while simultaneously carrying high interest debt is a dollar that is working against mathematically guaranteed ruin. You are losing the race before it even starts. If you appreciate that I refuse to sugarcoat the vicious reality of compound interest working against you, I expect you to hit the like button now. It helps separate this painful truth from the noise and nonsense. This is where the concept of delayed gratification becomes not just a virtue, but a mandatory financial survival skill. We live in an era where everyone demands things instantly. The perfect vacation, the newest device, the flashiest car. And the banks are all too happy to facilitate this self-sabotage by offering you the temporary pleasure now for the guaranteed pain later. The difference between rich and poor is often defined by whether they view debt as a tool or a toy. Warren and I use debt, very conservatively, as a tool to purchase assets that reliably generate more cash than the debt cost. The average person uses debt as a toy to purchase depreciating consumption items that generate zero cash flow. They borrow money at 22% to buy a car that loses 15% of its value the moment it drives off the lot. That is the definition of financial lunacy. The wealthy pay cash for consumption. They use debt for production. The middle class uses debt for consumption and fails to fund production. So, eliminate the addiction to high-interest consumption credit. It is not merely bad, it is ruinous. Before you invest a single dollar in the market, your highest guaranteed rate of return is the 22% you save by paying off that card. That is a guaranteed risk-free return of 22%. Show me a stock that guarantees 22% risk-free. You cannot. Therefore, your highest priority must always be destroying high-cost debt. We are only scratching the surface of how standard cultural programming drains your future. You ought to subscribe now. If you want to ensure this kind of unpopular wisdom keeps showing up on your screen. Wealth Destroyer, number 3, chasing complexity and fads. I am 99 years old. I have watched speculative frenzy repeat itself dozens of times. The South Sea bubble, the railroad mania, the dot-com era, and the recent idiocy involving digital tokens and meme stocks. The details change. The mode of speculation shifts from canals to fiber optics to cryptocurrencies. But the underlying psychology remains identical. People buy things they do not understand because they see their neighbor getting rich. And the psychological trigger of envy is far more powerful than the logical counterforce of prudence. This is a violation of the simplest and most foundational rule of intelligent investing. Stay within your circle of competence. If you cannot explain to a reasonably bright 16-year-old how an asset generates cash flow or why its valuation is sensible relative to its underlying economics, you have no business owning it. You are speculating, not investing. And speculation is not wealth creation. It is sophisticated gambling where the odds are inherently stacked against the amateur. The greatest destroyer within this category is the pursuit of complex or fashionable investment vehicles, things that are designed to sound sophisticated precisely because sophistication masks low underlying value. Think of the proliferation of complicated derivatives, structured products, or in the modern context, assets like non-fungible tokens or niche blockchain technologies whose value propositions rely entirely on narrative, hype, and the greater fool theory. Why do amateurs fall for complexity? Because the human brain is wired for authority, bias, and social proof. If a product is pitched using jargon, complex mathematical models, and endorsed by seemingly successful people who are often simply paid promoters, the average person assumes that they must be too stupid to understand its genius, rather than concluding that the asset is simply a scam or a speculative frenzy. We have always sought simple businesses with obvious, durable, competitive advantages. Think of See's Candy. It is conceptually simple. It creates cash flow, has pricing power, and utilizes a wide moat based on emotional connection and brand reputation. I can explain the mechanics of See's Candy to a child. I cannot, and neither can most promoters, explain the intrinsic value of 5% of what passes for innovation in today's highly speculative market. When you purchase complexity, you are paying for obscurity. You are handing your money over to people who thrive in environments where transparency is low and fees are high. And remember, the primary rule of fees: they destroy compounding. If you invest in a complex fund that charges 2% management fees and a 20% performance fee, you have hired a partner who takes a massive guaranteed cut of your success while providing zero guarantee against failure. The solution is radical simplification. Avoid anything requiring a specialist dictionary to understand. Avoid anything where the primary marketing pitch is about how quickly you will get rich. Stick to things that have been proven over centuries: productive farmland, durable businesses with pricing power, and index funds that mimic the entire aggregated engine of global enterprise. These investments are boring, predictable, and they maximize the efficacy of your greatest wealth creation tool: time and compounding. When you buy into complexity, you are buying a lottery ticket. When you buy into simplicity and value, you are buying a piece of the world's cash-generating machinery. The former guarantees wealth destruction through high fees, high volatility, and eventual collapse. The latter ensures slow, steady, and inevitable growth. Wealth destroyer number 4, lifestyle creep driven by envy. This destroyer is purely psychological, yet its financial consequences are devastatingly physical. It is the insidious need to signal status and keep pace with a social peer group whose financial realities you do not fully understand. The human being is afflicted by the social proof bias and envy, perhaps more than any other creature. We are programmed to compare ourselves to others, and in the modern world, that comparison is relentless, instantaneous, and highly selective. Instagram shows you the vacation, not the debt statement. As your income rises, so does your baseline expenditure. This is lifestyle creep. If you earn $100,000, you spend $90,000 and save $10,000. If you earn $200,000, the successful person should spend $100,000 and save $100,000. The victim of lifestyle creep spends $190,000, buys the bigger house, destroyer number 1, buys the luxury car, destroyer number 2's cousin, and saves only $10,000. The rate of savings has not meaningfully improved, but the structural costs, the fixed overhead needed just to maintain the lifestyle, have dramatically increased. The worst manifestation of this is purchasing high-end consumer goods that depreciate rapidly for the sole purpose of external validation. Take the luxury automobile. The moment you drive it off the lot, it is consumption, not investment. It is transportation, and you are paying a massive, non-refundable premium for the psychological satisfaction of the badge on the hood. That premium disappears into the ether, and the asset itself loses 50% of its value in the first 5 years. If you purchase a $70,000 car when a perfectly safe and reliable $30,000 car would suffice. You have voluntarily destroyed $40,000 of capital, plus the vastly higher insurance, maintenance, and interest costs associated with the luxury model. That $40,000, if invested early in your career, could have generated enormous long-term wealth through compounding. But the real damage of envy is that it forces you into bad economic geography. People feel compelled to live in neighborhoods that stretch their budgets thin because they want their children to attend a particular school, or they want to be close to a specific peer group. This forces them to purchase an overly expensive primary residence, destroyer number 1, which necessitates taking on more debt, destroyer number 2, which reduces their savings rate, trapping them in a cycle where they must maintain a high salary simply to cover their fixed costs. You become a high-income pauper. You make a lot of money, but you own nothing of lasting value, and you are terrified of losing your job because your fixed expenses are astronomical. We chose to live modestly, intentionally, below our means for decades. We never felt the need to signal wealth, because true wealth does not require signaling. It speaks for itself through the resulting freedom and optionality. If you are buying anything primarily because you want your friends, neighbors, or social media followers to think you are successful, you are purchasing an expensive form of psychological comfort that is actively destroying your ability to achieve actual durable success. Learn to be happy with enough. Learn to love the savings rate, not the new gadget. The greatest edge you can possess in the modern consumption economy is the deep, genuine ability to say, I simply do not care what you think of my possession. This liberation from social validation frees up enormous amounts of capital and, critically, psychological bandwidth that can be applied to real wealth creation. The inability to control envy, vanity, and social comparison is a wealth destroyer more potent than any stock market crash. Wealth destroyer number 5, constant activity and speculative trading. The final destroyer is the belief that activity equals progress, particularly in the realm of finance. This manifests as excessive trading, day trading, watching the market news hourly, and constantly tinkering with one's portfolio based on short-term noise. This is the ultimate violation of the central tenet of wealth creation: patience, inaction, and the belief in the power of sustained compounding. The market is designed structurally to punish activity. First, taxes. Every time you make a profitable trade and realize a short-term capital gain, holding the asset for less than a year, the government steps in and takes a substantial percentage, often 30% or more, depending on your income bracket. If you had simply held that asset for longer than a year, the tax rate would drop significantly. You are literally paying the government a premium for your impatience. Second, fees and friction. While brokerage commissions are near zero now, the bid-ask spreads, the eventual small execution costs, and the psychological drag of constantly monitoring noise still compound against you. If you make 100 trades a year, you must overcome 100 sets of friction costs that the patient investor avoids. But the most critical detriment of constant activity is psychological. It transforms investing from a methodical, long-term search for excellent businesses into a zero-sum, adrenalized game. The day trader is not utilizing Munger's mental models. They are relying on recency bias, hindsight bias, and action bias. They feel compelled to do something, anything, because inaction feels lazy or unprofitable. We made our fortunes by sitting on our hands. We rarely traded. We found businesses we understood, businesses with deep moats, honest managers, and sensible valuations, and we bought them with the intention of holding them forever or until the fundamental economics of the business deteriorated profoundly. When we hold a quality business for 20 years, we let the earnings compound, often tax deferred, until we eventually sell, usually due to necessity or a profound shift in the business landscape, like the advent of the internet disrupting traditional retail. In those 20 years, the constant trader, trying to time the 3-month ups and downs, is not only incurring taxes and fees, but is also far more likely to miss the massive, unpredictable spikes that deliver the vast majority of all market returns. Studies show that most market returns are concentrated in a very small number of trading days. If you are constantly hopping in and out, the risk that you are out of the market during one of those crucial upswings dramatically increases. The game is rigged in favor of the patient, and it is rigged against the fidgety. Furthermore, excessive activity is often a manifestation of gambler's fallacy and overconfidence. The trader has a few winning bets and believes he possesses special skill, when in reality, he was merely lucky. This confidence then leads to larger, more reckless bets, often using borrowed money, destroyer number 2, and eventually, one bad trade wipes out months or years of small gains. Our preferred method is the opposite: extreme inaction, punctuated by very rare, extreme patience, waiting for the fat pitch. The market is like a baseball game where there are no called strikes. You can stand there forever waiting for the perfect juicy pitch that guarantees success, and if it doesn't come, you don't swing. The average person swings wildly at every perceived opportunity, often fouling the ball straight back into the dirt, and eventually tiring themselves out and quitting the game entirely. So, to summarize the mathematics of these 5 destroyers, you are either compounding or being compounded upon. If you buy a highly leveraged, illiquid, consumption-based asset like a house, you introduce massive friction costs, destroyer number 1. If you finance that consumption using 22% interest, destroyer number 2, you guarantee negative compounding. If you then apply the small amount of remaining capital to highly complex, trendy assets, you don't understand, destroyer number 3. Your high fees and speculation erode what little profit you might scrape together. And all of this is driven by the psychological need to keep up with the Joneses and project false success, destroyer number 4. Finally, you panic and trade constantly, realizing short-term gains and paying maximum taxes, destroyer number 5. This entire ecosystem is designed to capture capital from the impatient, the envious, and the mathematically illiterate. Now, let's dive deeper into the root cause of why these destructive habits persist, focusing on the mental models that should protect you but are often ignored. The tyranny of misapplied incentives and psychological biases. The structural problem with wealth destruction is that the entire ecosystem benefits from your stupidity. The banks, the brokers, the real estate agents, the luxury goods manufacturers, their incentives are perfectly misaligned with your own long-term success. Take the house again. Why is it so fervently promoted as the cornerstone of adult life? Because the banks earn decades of interest, the government gets perpetual property taxes, and realtors earn 6% of the gross sale price for remarkably little value added in the grand scheme of things. No one makes money if you rent cheaply and invest your down payment in a low-fee index fund. That path is quiet, boring, and efficient. And because it is efficient, it bypasses the fee takers entirely. We must rely on incentive, super aversion. Assume that anyone selling you something expensive or complex does so entirely for their own benefit, not yours. until proven otherwise. Think about the destructive nature of credit card debt. Destroyer number 2. The bank is incentivized to maximize your credit limit and minimize the clarity of the minimum payment structure. They are selling you a drug, instant gratification, and the price is your financial future. They understand basic human weakness, specifically pain avoidance. Tendency: people avoid the short-term pain of saving up and instead embrace the short-term pleasure of immediate consumption, pushing the pain of high interest far into the foggy future. The person who succeeds must actively combat these systemic incentives. They must build what I call an internal operating system based on rational calculation, not emotional response. Deep dive: the true cost of destroyer 1, the illusion of equity. Let's revisit the house because it remains the biggest single trap for the aspiring rich. The average person believes they are building equity. They are indeed. But what kind of equity? Illiquid, non-diversified equity that requires constant funding. Compare this to owning shares in Berkshire Hathaway or an equivalent portfolio of quality global businesses. That equity is liquid. I can sell 1% of my holdings in 30 seconds for zero transaction cost, and the capital is immediately fungible. I can buy medical care, pay a bill, or reinvest. Try selling 1% of your house. You cannot. To extract cash from your house, you must take out a home equity line of credit, HELOC, which is more debt, destroyer number 2, or you must undergo the Herculean effort of refinancing involving fees, appraisals, and paperwork, which is more friction and cost. This lack of fungibility means that your capital is inefficiently locked up. It reduces your ability to capitalize on external opportunities. Imagine a market crash presents phenomenal buying opportunities for stocks. The renter has liquid cash ready to deploy. The homeowner has all their capital trapped in the walls and foundation of a non-productive asset. This inability to act on opportunity due to illiquidity is a silent wealth destroyer. It is the cost of missed gains, which mathematically can be enormous. If you miss a decade of 10% compounding on $100,000, you have essentially destroyed over $150,000 of future wealth. We must always choose liquid, fungible, and diversified assets over illiquid, concentrated, and consumption-based ones, especially during the critical accumulation phase of life. Deep dive: destroyer for 3, and the madness of crowd. The persistent attraction to speculative fads is rooted in a fundamental human fear, the fear of missing out, or FOMO. This is the central engine of the Lollapalooza effect in finance. Multiple psychological tendencies converging to create extreme outcomes. When tulip mania hit the Netherlands in the 1630s, the tulip bulbs became detached from their intrinsic value, a flower. They became pure speculation fueled by 1. Social proof. Everyone is doing it, so it must be smart. 2. Envy. My neighbor sold his farm and bought a single Viceroy bulb. I must do the same. 3. Deprival superreaction syndrome. The irrational panic that you will be permanently left behind if you don't jump in now. The same psychology drives the frenzy for meme stocks or complex derivatives today. The complexity is the camouflage. People use financial models that are mathematically impenetrable to justify values that are economically absurd. A simple business, like a successful regional bank or a well-managed utility, generates predictable cash flow based on real economic activity. Its valuation is grounded in discounted future cash flows, a simple arithmetic calculation. A speculative fraud's valuation is based on what the next idiot will pay for it. This isn't investing. It is relying on finding a greater fool. And if you rely on finding a greater fool, you must realize that eventually you become the greatest fool in the chain. The solution to destroyer number 3 is simple intellectual honesty. You must look at the asset and ask, is this cash flow generating, or is this dependent on narrative and enthusiasm? If the answer is the latter, run. If the complexity is high, the fees are high, and the valuation is based on future promises rather than present results, treat it as toxic, waste, no. Deep dive, destroyer. Number 4, and the illusion of status. The corrosive power of envy stems from the misdiagnosis of happiness. People confuse wealth with status, and status is expensive because it is transient. In my youth, if you had a basic car, you were fine. Today, if you don't have a large, relatively new SUV, people feel poor. This continuous escalation of the required baseline for normal living is engineered by advertising and social pressure. If you can master the principle of self-correction and disinterestedness, you win. You must mentally isolate yourself from the spending habits of your neighbors, friends, and co-workers. Their debt is not your problem, and their temporary luxury is not your goal. Your goal is permanent, enduring financial freedom, which often looks quiet and boring from the outside. We know that true wealth offers options. The option to say no to a terrible boss, the option to retire early, the option to dedicate your time to things you love. None of these options are purchased with a brand new Mercedes. They are purchased with years of disciplined saving and smart compounding. The luxury car buyer is signaling that they are trapped on the hamster wheel, forced to keep working to pay for the depreciating asset. The person driving the 10-year-old reliable car while holding millions in diversified assets is the one who is truly free. Their consumption is minimal. Their options are maximal. The cost of destroyer 4 is often measured in decades of unnecessary work just to fund the illusion of success. Deep dive, destroyer 5, activity, agency, and the false god of expertise. The finance industry loves destroyer 5, constant activity, because it maximizes their fees and gives them agency. A broker is paid to recommend action. They are almost never paid to recommend you sit still for 5 years, even if that inaction is the mathematically correct path. This bias towards action is rooted in agency cost. The people advising you are compensated for doing, not for waiting. Furthermore, constant trading appeals to the ego. The amateur trader believes they can outsmart the collective wisdom of the market, an intellectual conceit of staggering proportions. The market contains billions of data points, professional PhDs, and massive technological resources. The idea that a private individual can consistently spot a mispricing and act upon it profitably, overcoming transaction costs and taxes, is often delusion. Our method is based on accepting intellectual limits and using the power of checklists. We check the fundamentals. Is the management ethical? Is the moat durable? Is the price reasonable relative to future cash flows? If the answer is yes, we buy and wait. If the answer is no, we do nothing. Doing nothing is often the smartest move, but it is psychologically unsatisfying. The market rewards the disciplined ascetic, not the hyperactive adrenaline junkie. To avoid the 5 destroyers, you must embrace a philosophy of defensive wealth creation. 1. Prioritize production over consumption. Ensure every major financial decision adds to your cash flow rather than subtracting from it. Your house subtracts. Your business assets add. 2. Accept boringness. True compounding is boring. If your investments are exciting, they are usually speculative. 3. Use simple arithmetic. If the expected return of an investment is less than the guaranteed negative drag of your debt, 22% interest, the debt must be eliminated first. This is non-negotiable. 4. Master self-control. Your greatest wealth asset is your temperament and your ability to ignore the crowd, the media, and your envious neighbor. The path to getting rich is simpler than anyone wants to admit, because the simplicity reduces the fee pool for those selling complexity. Avoid the 5 destroyers. Embrace boring assets. Save aggressively, and let the relentless mathematical certainty of compounding work for you, not against you. And always remember, the best way to outperform 90% of the financial world is simply to avoid playing their games. If you can manage to avoid these 5 primary traps, your success becomes mathematically inevitable, barring genuine catastrophe. And even catastrophes are easier to navigate when you possess liquidity, low debt, and high-quality, diversified assets. Now, go forth and subtract the nonsense from your balance sheet.